Cat F. Welcome to World War II Live. John C. McManus here, and alongside, as always, my good buddy Kevin Hymel, and of course our crack producer Mark Festoso. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, John. Hey, John, I just want to tell you that tonight I am the Boris and Natasha to your Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Wow.
That's highfalutin intellectual stuff. Nothing says high intellect like cartoons from the 1970s.
There you go.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And
That's,
60s,
that's,
yeah.
that's also like a Cold War reference, right? Because that was all
Yeah,
kind of
that was a
spy.
60s cartoon. And
Right.
at one point, I think they brought a van about Frostburg. Was it Frostburg Falls, I think is the name of the fictitious location.
Yeah.
And they came to D.C. to do something promotional, and everything was shut down. And they're like, what happened? John F. Kennedy had been assassinated.
Wow.
And so that was like a moment in history. But I think what they're most famous for is that Bullwinkle Moose went to the University of Wasamatta. As we all know, what's the matter you?
Man, that's some old comedy there. Classic.
What good.
That's classic stuff. I
It
mean,
is.
you
Hey,
one would
let
think
me
you're smart.
reach out to all our audience here. So I want to say we're on this will be like episode 10. I think we're releasing.
Yep,
So
yep.
that's amazing. Like time is flying. But we're now getting lots of awesome questions for Stump the Chumps from everyone out there, from all across the country, all across the world, and it's amazing. So we're going to try to get to them. But we are now in the enviable position of having more questions that we can kind of get out there. But we're going to work hard to do that. We're thinking of maybe, like on a Thursday, releasing a short little Stump the Chump segment so you can get a little more of your questions out there. And this episode, I'm going to try to jam-pack a lot of stuff in. So hopefully we can get a lot of good
Sweet.
things going.
The
Yeah,
3-hour episode
Yeah,
we got here
that's
tonight.
right.
Yeah.
So keep those questions coming, everyone.
Just like the 3-hour tour, to speak of, yesterday.
Oh, dang, I got to check that off my list. You just took one away from me.
Oh, sorry. Well, maybe, when enough time passes, you can come back to that one.
All right.
And I hope you're the Gilligan to my Skipper, maybe something like that. But
Or Marianne to your Ginger.
that'd be the opposite,
What?
maybe. But Mark mentioned the questions, and bears reminding what the email address is where you can send the questions. Of course, it's worldwar2live@gmail.com, worldwar2live@gmail.com, and of course, it's a Arabic numeral 2. We also, the other thing I want to mention, we've got a really cool multi-part Sicily series coming up, so look for that in the weeks ahead. Obviously, it'll be released on our YouTube channel. Please go there, like, subscribe, give us comments. We love the comments. It's just so cool to hear from you, and that. Thank you for doing that, by the way, for those
Can't
who
get
have.
enough of it. Yeah.
Can't get enough of it. And of course, on the audio podcast side, Apple, Spotify, all the usual platforms. We just want you here, subscribing, liking, sharing, participating. That is half the fun. So don't forget about our Sicily series that's going to be coming up. But tonight, we are going to focus on this amazing book that one of our hosts did and wrote. It was his first book, right? Patton's Photographs.
Yeah, my first book.
By Kevin Michael Hymel. So Patton's Photographs, War as He Saw It. So as I see it, my friend, this is like the first indicator of, how would I say this? Of your kind of originality and innovation in relation to Patton studies, because we'd had Patton biographies by the time you and I came along.
Yep.
Farrago, Blummenson, obviously Carlo D'Este, Herschen. But I don't know that anybody really ever sat back and thought, Patton's big hobby was photography. He carried a camera everywhere with him. And so
That's
here
right.
you come along and have that very original take on it. How did that all come together for you?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you about all my brilliance and genius in discovering this. No. First of all, I want to apologize to all our podcast listeners because we're about to talk about a book of photographs that General Patton took, Patton's Photographs, but we will be very descriptive in this episode, so hopefully it won't be lacking, but hopefully it'll encourage you to check it out. So, John, I was working at an archaeology company. I was an historian for an archaeology company in New Orleans, and felt really alone, very a fish out of water kind of situation. And I had just, in my mind, I was thinking about the day Patton met MacArthur in World War I. and how they met on a hill, and an artillery barrage came over, like it was a marching barrage, so it was approaching them, and everybody ducks, and Patton and MacArthur just stood there talking. And Patton wrote about it the next day. He said, we were both scared. We didn't know what either was saying, but neither of us were about to duck. And the stories I read from the MacArthur side were like, oh, this young Patton guy was really nervous, but I calmed him. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And so I was doing research on that. And I guess in the time that I was doing it, I moved back to Washington, D.C., and I went to the Library of Congress, to the Manuscripts Division. I said, I want to see Patton's papers, regarding World War I, so I can see this. And so they brought me the finding aid for me to find what boxes I wanted. And I was going through it, and all of a sudden I see these lists of photo albums, and I didn't know what they were, so I ordered them. And they brought a couple of them out. I think there's 11 altogether, and they're these big coffee table book, kind of books. And I was opening them up, and they were packed full of photographs from World War II that I had never seen before. And, even when we were in our 20s, after a while, the photos start to repeat in all the books we see. You can rattle the Patton in the fleece coat, and, the Patton in his tent in August, in France. But these were all things I had never seen before. And I'm like, oh, my God, these are the pictures he took with his own camera. So I wrote an article about it, and I took it to Martin Blumenson, my mentor, and I just dropped off the article without any of the photographs. And he called me, and I went back over to his place, and he was reviewing everything with me. And I just said, Martin, did you learn anything here you didn't know before? And he goes, yeah, I didn't know Patton took pictures. And it's documented. He talks about it. And so I ran the article eventually in WWII History magazine. And World War II magazine did not have the format to do a photo essay back then. And so that was one of the advantages with Carl Nam, is we could be creative like that. And the sales of the magazine went up 2% or something. And that's huge, in the magazine world, to get a bump like that. And so I brought the magazine back to Martin. They're like, hey, look what you helped me do. And then I said, would this work as a book? And Martin said, yeah, do you have an agent? And I wisely said, what's an agent? And so he got on the phone and got me his agent. And I started working on this book that became Patton's Photographs.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, see, the cool part of that is that, here you're talking to Martin Blumenson. I think we'd all agree is, first among equals at a minimum in terms of knowing Patton, having served in his army, and obviously being one of his leading biographers and a distinguished World War II veteran and historian. And we all obviously look up to Martin Blumenson, and he was your mentor. And yet here he says, I didn't know that he took all these pictures. That just shows how many dimensions there are to this. And I just thought, the other thing that occurred to me too, Kevin, is of course, we've talked about the Patton diary a lot, and obviously it backwards and forwards, having gone into the original part with the chicken scratch handwriting and all that kind of stuff. So you're getting the literary version of Patton's vision, but this is the actual visual base point of the
vision of the vision.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's so interesting. So I remember back, around when we met, I think you were telling me about this concept, and I just loved it. I'm just like, dude, you need to go with this.
Yeah, I remember writing in the introduction how what an historian does is try to get inside the head of the person they're studying. And how perfect is this? I'm looking at exactly what he looked at because he's holding that lens up to his eye. And so it's like, hey, there's no gray area here. I know exactly what he's looking at and why that's influencing what he's writing in his diaries and letters and what he's not writing in his diaries and letters. And so, I felt like I wasn't like, oh my God, there's this whole part of Patton you didn't know about. It was, hey, there's this Patton we know, and I can add another depth level, to it. It wasn't, I've got this twist. It was, man, I can bring gravity, to what we already know. And it was just so satisfying. As an historian, especially when you're starting out, to be able to crack a code on anything, because there's so many, you read the same stories sometimes so much. It's that guy that does a little bit extra research and says, oh, there's another wrinkle, there's another layer here. And it's so satisfying as an historian to be able to deliver something like that.
Oh, big time. Yeah, big time. And so, I mean, what's kind of interesting, too, is looking at what Patton elected to take pictures of and knowing maybe what he didn't. And you know what I mean? So that tells you something, too. I don't know how well this translates to see on the YouTube channel. But you can just kind of see some of his photos here. And so the format of the book is that, Kevin obviously is kind of tracing something of Patton's path through World War II. So there's plenty of prose and structure to the book in terms of the background on the battles and what he's up to at any given time, and the captions, of course, that you come up with, which, by the way, is a whole nother line of inquiry too in terms of scholarship, because as we know so painfully, a lot of the captions you see on original photos are actually not true, and so we have to kind of parse that out sometimes too. So don't you think that let me rephrase it. Didn't you get a better sense of who this guy was as you were looking through his photo album and as you're sort of structuring this book? And you kind of felt like you were getting to know him a little bit.
Yeah, very true. Because it's Patton kind of with his hair down. He's not guarded. What you were just saying about captions, captions were written by the government or the military because they want you to see what you're looking at, what their interpretation is. Where Patton, this is a personal interpretation of what he's writing, underneath all these photographs. And what was I gonna? There was some point I wanted to make with you about this. That when I started doing the research, the inclination when you do anything research on Patton, you go to Blumenson's Patton's papers. Well, yeah, right. I went to the actual diaries, which I realize now were not the actual diaries. They were the typed up diaries. But he would write about photography. And when Blumenson wrote the Patton papers, he had to cut little parts out that he didn't think were relevant to the narrative of his army leadership and things like that. So I was finding stuff in his actual papers that Martin hadn't used. And it was enjoyable because it wasn't like I had to relearn strategy and tactics. Like I said, I was a young guy approaching this complex topic. No, I'm just talking about the guy and what he's looking at. And so it was, for me, a great introduction where I would eventually be able to write about those things. But yeah, I really felt like I was getting to know him on a level that my contemporaries and my mentor did not.
Yeah. So for those of you listening on the audio platforms, no worries. Just come over to the YouTube channel, and we'll have some of these pictures to show you, so you can kind of visualize this. I mean, obviously, like Kevin had said, this is a book of photographs, or at least that's the centerpiece of it. So, I mean, that doesn't always translate as well as we would like to an audio setting, but there are ways around that, and even so, it's still fascinating. And so like, I'm interested in the kind of the nuts and bolts of how this works, because obviously his main priority is leading soldiers and
fighting a war. Yeah,
fighting war, and but at the same time, I mean, obviously, the camera's a big part of who he is and what he's doing. So how did it work? Did he just and he's leaving his HQ each day, say, "Oh, I got to grab my camera and I got to get it developed tonight"? I mean, what was the nuts and bolts of the whole thing?
So it was a Leica camera, which is a Swedish and German production model. And just like everything else with Patton, he had his initials on the back in gold. And he really does carry it everywhere. And of course, once you're working on a book about Patton's photographs, you start noticing in photographs that he's wearing the camera here and there, And I guess even in the movie, when he shows up at Second Corps headquarters at the very beginning, and he's talking to Carl Malden as Omar Bradley, and he's taking off his coat and his goggles, that camera's around his neck, and he's taking that off. And then the only other time you see it in the movie is that great speech in the snow when the men are all marching by. No other army in the world could, break off from a winter offensive, no hot food. And he's got the camera around his neck. Ironically, that's when he took the least photographs. But so he had the camera at all times. He didn't always send film home for development. He was using production equipment in country. And so a lot of the stuff he took in North Africa is low quality. They had trouble with some of the chemicals. I had the photographer that helped me shoot the photos out of the photo albums was explaining to me that how they would use silver from times, and some of the silver was running off the photograph. So I was really learning a lot of the mechanics. And but he would say to his wife, one of the guys just made a rewinding device for me to make it easier. I regret that I don't have any color film because this dead German's face is the color of claret wine, typical Patton quotes, So he actually talks about it quite a bit, but yeah, that, and the other thing I noticed, and this is all of us, he would take a lot of pictures of civilians, behind the line, back behind the lines when you're relaxed and stuff like that. And his combat photographs, they start off with destroyed vehicles that have already been bypassed by the war. And as the war goes on into not as much Sicily, but when he gets into France, then he's frontline trenches. He gets, as he becomes more confident, he gets closer and closer to the combat, and he's more comfortable taking photographs. And to me, that's a sign of real confidence that he knows what he's doing so well that he can snap off a few photographs while he's doing all this. And John, you tell me, I don't know of any other general 2-star or above that has such a photographic collection from World War II.
I mean, not in terms of, carrying the camera with them everywhere,
right,
and making that a priority. I can't think of it offhand. Maybe there was somebody. I can certainly think of others who have a terrific collection of photos of them by other people or of their path, But this is quite different. I mean, you mentioned him taking pictures of the scenes he's witnessing. Again, I know this isn't ideal, but you can see picture of a body, an enemy soldier's body.
Yep.
Picture of a dead mule. And then you talked about fortifications and whatnot, and wrecked vehicles and all this kind of stuff. And this is just in the I think in the Sicily.
That is Sicily. I mean, and it's funny, John, there's a photograph of a dead German, and Patton talked about how the German would sabotage their dead. So they'd pull the pin on a hand grenade, put it under his armpit, so when an American came and rolled the body over, the hand grenade would roll out and boom. And Patton said it resulted in less German prisoners being taken. And I think we all know what that means. But the publisher said, you need to explain that. We don't know what that means. And I'm like, well, he's saying, shoot the dead. He's showing an aggressive attitude, I'll just say, towards capturing enemy wounded and bypassing the dead. And it comes out. He's writing for himself in these things. He's not writing to get past the Army censor. He's all out there, talking about how he feels about stuff.
And we, as historians, can kind of contextualize what he's saying, almost in a troubling way, because, of course, we have the shooting of prisoners that happens on Sicily.
The Mascari massacre.
Yeah, exactly. And now, does that happen because Patton has, and others have uncovered these booby-trapped bodies? I think maybe that's hard to establish the link. But it's just kind of interesting. He'd say that, and we know, what happens and kind of what the context is, too. The other point, I mean, the Leica camera was a high-end brand, and I think that tracks, too, because Patton is a guy who had some wealth and resources. And so he'd have access to that kind of camera rather than an old Brownie or something that somebody else might have. Thus, you have, obviously, that shows the commitment to this, and maybe some more quality images than you might otherwise have, right?
Yep. And I'll add this too, John. One of the reasons, I remember one of my friends when I was working on the book, and your first book takes forever because you're very insecure, you've never done anything like it before, you drag your feet a bit. And one of my friends was getting paranoid that someone was going to beat me to publishing this. And I remember going to the Library of Congress and going, who else has looked at these photographs? And Bruce Kirby was looking through the record. He goes, oh, someone would just know it's you. It was like, yeah, nobody but me. But what was interesting is when the Patton family donated his papers to the Library of Congress at Martin Blumensen's request, they brought him up to their home in Hamilton, Massachusetts, and down to the basement with these files. And Martin almost has a heart attack. He goes, if there's a fire in the house, you've lost all his records, which is exactly what happens to his son. Lost all his records because he was smoking and fell asleep. They moved the records to the Library of Congress, but not the photo albums. The photo albums came about 10 years or 15 years later, and normally Library of Congress rules You supply photographs. Those photographs go up to the still pictures department. The Patton family deliberately said, no, we want this whole collection in one place. So the average photo bug, going up to still photos is not going to find these. It's got to be somebody going through the Patton papers looking that's going to. So I think in a way they were hidden in plain sight. And I just happened to be the lucky bastard that stumbled across them when I did.
Yeah, serendipity and timing are everything. That's the way it goes. And,
what works.
Yeah, so you mentioned they're like oversized photo albums. So I'm kind of curious too, like the handling of that. So you've reproduced the images in the book. They're really, really good, vivid images in the book. Again, the book is called Patton's Photographs, War as He Saw It. This was Kevin's first book. Highly recommended. And so you're handling these photos with great care, I assume. And so how did that all work with you working through these photo albums, deciding which images to use, and then like handling them and ending up on the publication side?
Right. So I should add too, John. So Patton would send the photographs home. He would write on the back of them. And then Beatrice would put them into photo albums and transcribe below. So sometimes he would actually write on the photographs. You get an idea of his chicken scratch handwriting. But then you'd see what Beatrice wrote below. And then I don't know if the Pattons did this or I think Library of Congress did this because the photo albums are so nice and well cared for. But each page is under Mylar. And if you're at the archives, with a lot of those binders, you can unscrew them, and then look at individual pages. You can't do that at the Library of Congress. So I had called about 3 different photographers to shoot the photos out of the book. And like the first 2 guys came back and said, $5,000, I'll do it. And $8,000, I'll do it. I'm like, oh, God. Well, the first guy called and left a message, call me back, Bob Knudsen. And he goes, Kevin, I'm trying to write a book on Arlington Cemetery. And it's really, I've been going around and he's a photographer. He said, I've been going around the cemetery for 2 years just taking photos. And my book's just 4 chapters, winter, summer, fall, spring. And, but I don't know how to write. So if you write the introductions to my book, the chapter openings, I'll take the photographs for free. So in a way, I got 2 books for the price of one. Nice. But what we had to do, and the staff was so helpful for this, they gave us a room. We brought in the photo albums. Like I said, there's about 11 of them. And then I would hold them up and put a black velvet blanket over myself. And then he would take a black velvet blanket and put it over himself so there'd be less reflection and everything. It wasn't a perfect system, but it worked really well. And they said they'd give us just an hour to do it. They gave us an hour and a half. They were really kind about it. And then he sent me the photographs. And it was surprisingly difficult because I had done so many photo essays at this point for WWII History Magazine. I kind of had the whole rhythm down and everybody did. And when I sent them to the publisher for the book, for the introduction, I had all the pictures of Patton wearing the camera and then, the pictures of that he had taken chronologically. Well, they mixed in all the pictures of him with the camera to the other ones, and I was driving me nuts. And, first-time publisher, I didn't want to be that guy, but I was kind of that guy. And I wanted to call it, like, Patton's photo albums, because technically they were the photo albums. And they said, no, Patton's photographs much better. And I'm like, no, but they were right. And I remember I wanted to call it War as He Saw It, because the famous book War as He Knew It. And it was Martin Blummenson who said, Kevin, you got to put the word Patton in the title. You'll triple sales. So these are the things we need to learn as young historians, Yeah,
well, and you and I have talked about this many times. You formed the belief back then, and you still have the belief now. Like the first sentence of your book is like everything, And I think in a way you put too much pressure on yourself in doing that. I mean, anybody who's read my books knows that I probably don't have that great a commitment to the first sentence. Oh, whatever's there, But Kevin absolutely will invest hours, days in this. So for your first book, as I can imagine, and I sort of remember, you were really, really wanting to get that right. So how did that all shape up?
Well, it's funny because when I wrote the article, I brought it to Martin Blummenson, and he looked at the opening sentence, and he said, Kevin, do you know Corey Ryan? And I looked at him, I said, you mean Cornelius Ryan? And he goes, yeah. I go, well, I'm not on a nickname basis with him like you might be. And he, yeah, well, I think he was alive at the time. Maybe, no, I guess he was. He had passed at the
He
time.
died in the early 70s, mid 70s.
Okay. And so Martin said, well, Kevin, do you know how many times he rewrote the opening sentence to A Bridge Too Far? And I'm like, no. He goes, over 100 times. So I went home, immediately cracked open the book, and the first sentence was, everyone in the ancient town of Driel listened intently. And that's when I learned that the purpose of an opening sentence, not is it to just draw the reader in, but get the reader to read the next sentence. What this ancient town, what are they listening for? And so that is something that's been my lodestone, my guiding star ever since, to draw them in and get them to the next sentence. Because, John, my philosophy is that readers get bored. And just because you've written something doesn't mean people are going to read it. You have got to pull them in and say, man, I got a really cool story I'm going to tell you. And I want to be a Spielberg. I'm going to take you for a ride. Indiana Jones is going to have this ball roll down right behind him, and keep the reader engaged. So yeah, that is something I definitely put pressure on myself for, but I love where that came from. I love that whole Corey Ryan story.
Yeah, I love the insider nickname there too. For a guy who's a legend to you and me, who we never knew, of course, but grew up being
Corey
influenced
Ryan.
by. So as we start to wrap up, running a little low on time before we get to Stump the Chumps. What, in your opinion, is the most compelling photo that is in your book? Again, Patton photographs war as he saw it. What do you think?
So it's funny. To me, the most compelling photograph, there's actually two of them, and there's no human beings in them. And to me, it's the story that's compelling. So we're familiar with, Patton's great victory in Sicily, but he slaps two soldiers in the hospitals, and he kind of goes into exile in Sicily. And in early January 1944, he visits the front in Italy with, I think it's Jeffrey Keyes, who's commanding Second Corps there. And they're walking along a hillside, and Patton looks down basically to his right, and he sees these artillery cannons firing. So he stops and takes a picture, and in the photo album, he says, this picture saved my life. Because by stopping to take it, it turned out a German artillery barrage explodes like 30 yards in front of him. And if he hadn't stopped to take that picture, he would have walked right into an artillery barrage. And then the next photo is these trees with no leaves on them that are just pot-marked and all the bark is missing. And he goes, this is where I would have been standing had I not taken that photograph. And this near-death experience tells him that God is saving him for something greater. And sure enough, within a week, he gets the call to go up to England to command a brand new army. And so to me, it's the story and the images combined that shows what a powerful impact photography had on Patton's career and the person he was and the historian that he was. Because he said, I'm taking all these pictures, if I can remember how to phrase it, so that some future historian will write a less untrue story of me. So that's the other burden I've been under all my life.
So it's high praise. We'll say you've written the less untrue version, that you've achieved that, and there you are. So, wow, fascinating stuff. Think how history would have been different if he'd continued on and been killed. Wow, mind-blowing.
Yep.
So yeah, it's Patton's Photographs, War as He Saw It. Check it out, read it, buy it, and love it. It's good stuff. So onward we go to Stump the Chumps. And another reminder before we get into that, don't forget about our Sicily episodes that are coming up in the next few weeks. Look for them on our YouTube channel and, of course, on our audio platforms. It's going to be great stuff. So Mark has been laying in wait to ambush us, of course, with the hardest questions that you all sent us. And I'm sure we'll end up as chumps like we usually do. All right. What do we got?
Mark, before you do that, let me just quickly mention Warfare History Network.com. are one of our favorite sponsors, the makers of WW2 History Magazine. The magazine covers all elements of World War II. In fact, the latest issue's got an article I wrote about Patton and Harriman, our ambassador to Moscow, who comes to Patton's front and they take a tour. So that's in the latest issue. But the magazine covers all elements of World War II: weapons, personalities, espionage, and then the great features with artwork and great photography from the time and maps. And so it's www. I think it's 3, right? www.warfarehistorynetwork.com. You can find all the articles from WW2 History there. You can either subscribe to the online version or subscribe to the magazine like old fogies like us. And as Carl Nam always says, warfarehistorynetwork.com will take you to the front lines. Mark, I hand it to you. Torture us with questions of World War II. And Mark is on mute.
Dude, I love this.
Dang
This
it.
is like a streak we got going here.
I know it's that Emmy quality producing you've come to expect.
He just doesn't want to stump the chumps. He wants to leave us alone in peace.
All right, Stump the Chumps. I'm just gonna throw a lot of stuff to try to get to a lot of people. Some of these are just comments. You don't really have to respond. But Dave DeFranco, we've been talking a lot about CADAF as we start the show with that. And last week's episode, someone wrote in, they thought it referred to the commander of the fleet. It was like his call sign.
Right.
But Dave DeFranco says, in a sense of irony, CADAF, and he spells it CAITAFF, is an Old English word of French origin, meaning coward. Edward the Black Prince refers to himself as a CADAF in the epitaph on his tomb, and the irony being that there's no cowards on Omaha Beach. So an
Wow.
interesting
That's funny
And
because I have the
another
same thing. I was going to say I have the same thing inscripted on my crypt for when I go. So just
That'll be very appropriate in your case. But
Yeah.
the other thing is that I think Black Prince, HMS Black Prince, was one of the supporting ships on D-Day, wasn't
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
We've come full circle.
Well, this is kind of
Yeah.
like, that old game, 7 Degrees of Separation, or
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon,
it?
yeah.
Kevin Bacon. Yeah,
It's-
Or Kevin Hymel,
Right.
yeah.
well, that's the more frightening 7 degrees of separation. But yes,
All right. Anyone else has any thoughts on CADAF? Please let us know.
Yeah.
It's super
Please
fun
do.
to bandy it around.
it
All right, here we
is.
go with a question from Mike from Louisville, Kentucky.
Lawville.
He says, Louisville, right? Louisville.
Louisville.
In your professional opinion, were the Airborne Division's combat results worth the investment in their creation and training, or were they just overly specialized infantry units? Enjoyable start to the channel. Good job, Mike. All right, what do you think? 101st Airborne, 82nd, worth it or not?
And 17th.
And 17th.
John, you want me to
And
go
11th.
first or you want to go first?
Yeah, you go ahead, Ken.
And the
Oh,
British
thanks.
1st and 6th. Let's not leave that out for our
Yeah.
English listeners.
So that is a real that's a head scratcher because the airborne troops did not perform well in Sicily and in North Africa either. I mean, there was a battalion that jumped, but it landed in a section where the Americans had already advanced. That was Edson Raff leading the very first. He was our first paratrooper. And then in Sicily, they're scattered both on the flight there and then the drop, and then there's a friendly fire incident that really gives a lot of the Allied generals cold feet. Like, is this worth, the damages? Because it was so new. But then you have Normandy, where it's I would say it's very successful. And if you want to measure how successful is the airborne drop, look at the casualties of the 4th Infantry Division coming ashore. And for whatever bunkers they may have missed, they were cutting wires and just causing so much confusion in the German lines. And then I guess the last one is to jump over the Rhine, which John, it's one of those things I knew a lot about peripherally, but then I had to really study. And I was using the books from the gentleman you just had on your other podcast with the 17th
James
Airborne.
Fenelon.
Yep. And that airborne drop happened the day after the amphibious assault across the Rhine. It wasn't the night before. I was really surprised to see that. Now, I
Later
should
in
add
the
that.
day.
Yep. And then there was another airborne drop in Italy with, I think it's the 504th, but they dropped behind the American lines. So I think there's arguments for both sides. They're definitely specialized light infantry. I don't think the 101st could have done what it did in Bastogne without the support of the elements of the 10th and 9th Armored Divisions. They miss a lot of praise that they deserve, and the 101st Airborne guys say that too.
And the 28th Infantry Division.
Well, the elements of the 28th too, yeah, pulling back. But I think it was the armor that made a big difference in the defense of the perimeter. So I would say, boy, I have a bit of a Patton bias because he had a bias against airborne troops. He believed in jumping just with regiments because he thought, divisions were too big. And when he was racing across France, there were all these airborne drops planned that got scrapped because he was moving so fast. And could they have helped him out as light infantry instead? Possibly. So I'm just going to lean. I'll say in some elements they were successful, but in too many they weren't. So I'm leaning against. John, take it from me.
I take all that into account and understand that. I'm leaning in favor of. I think overall they were, a positive influence. I'm going to add the Pacific to the equation too. That you got the 503rd that drops at Nadzab on New Guinea, and that's certainly very successful. You have the Noom 4 drop, which is more problematic in terms of jump injuries, but still does something of what it's supposed to do. Tagaytay Ridge is certainly, very, very important for the advance on Manila, and of course the drop on Corregidor is for the 503rd again is a major success on a lot of levels. So add to that, I think in terms of Sicily, I understand the problem with the scattered drops, but I think it's fair to say that once the airborne troopers are on the ground, they are difference makers. They fight very well. I mean, what happens in terms of staving off that German counterattack against Jela, the airborne plays a significant role there. The Normandy drops are absolutely imperative for the success of the Utah Beach invasion, like Kevin said. Market Garden, I'll add that too. I mean, I know the operation failed, but it's not because of the airborne. The airborne did precisely what it was supposed to do. The two U.S. airborne divisions, the British ran into a tougher go, but I think everybody would agree that these guys still fight their butts off and fight very, very hard, and they're really courageous. The problem is in the concept. Varsity is a better concept. And on that one, you drop the better part of two airborne divisions, one British and one American. So that's our 17th Airborne Division, and then the British 6th Airborne Division are going to go in there, and they're quite successful in their mission. So I know there's a lot of resources devoted to them, but relatively speaking, these are light infantry resources that are used well. My concern is like moving forward in time, whether airborne ever since has made as much sense, especially for large formations. We have only had, I think, two maybe combat jumps since World War II. I think there's one in Korea, and then there's one in Vietnam as part of Operation Junction City, I think. And then we're gonna have Panama. Okay, there are some others, and Grenada, not quite to the same scale.
Division jumped.
Not whole divisions, I guess. Yeah. But whether it's worth all the people and resources we pumped into it since, I think, is at least debatable. I know some people think it definitely isn't, and I get that. But the question was in relation to World War II. I'm on the leaning in favor side, I guess.
Two things, John. I think we've talked about this and we both agree. Airborne is much better in a set piece battle where you're planning things out, and it's not as effective on the run. Once again, like I said, because it takes time to organize and get everything set. Darn it, I forget what the other thing I was going to say was, but they definitely, at their advantage when it comes to a set piece battle. Oh, I know what I was going to say, especially with Market Garden, with these large airborne drops, you're depriving other resources from other units, and that was Patton's big pet peeve, because they were using those C-47 cargo planes to supply him with fuel, and it's not like the airborne's going to drop, we're going to miss it for a day. They reserve those aircraft for like a week as they prepare for the jump. And then, of course, airborne doctrine is once they're on the ground, and even if, they've met up with ground forces, their reinforcement is airborne. So it's not like you take away the C-47s for a day. You're taking them away for a long time. So there's a big ripple effect to the other forces.
That's true. And let's not forget, there's, obviously the glider dimension to the whole airborne side of the equation in World War II as well. And that's a one-off to World War II.
Yep.
Certainly, these are going to be some pretty high-speed fighters, like study the Battle of Lafayette, for instance. I mean, they're going to be difference makers. And, by the way, in the Pacific, the 11th Airborne Division really will start with more glider-borne guys than paratroopers. Eventually, you're going to have a division in which everybody's trained for both, and that's a different concept than you see in Europe. And I think it's fair to say the 11th Airborne is worth its weight in gold in the Battle of Leyte, not because they're jumping into combat, but because of how highly trained they are, and they can be resupplied by air, and they kind of have that muscle memory to do that. And then, of course, what they do in terms of invading at Nasugbu, south of Manila, and that drive to Manila and the, Tagaytay Ridge drop that I mentioned. I mean, that speaks for itself. So, I don't know. It's a really good question, though.
I think the answer is yeah.
Well, it's a judgmental question. It's not factual. What about
this? It's really not a black and white thing.
Yeah, it's a really thoughtful question, and I think it's worth going into because I can see kind of both sides of the debate, I guess.
Yep.
All right, I want to give Mike, who asked the question, an A because it's such a great question.
He deserves it.
That was really good. Yeah.
Go, Mike A.
Good answer. Yeah, it was all right. Okay. Next question is from Scott Brimer. He says, "Hey there, I have a question about the Alamo Scouts. I just finished a book about the Scouts and it was quite interesting. I'm wondering if they were as effective as the book made them out to be. They seem to be only a 6th Army asset and not an 8th Army asset. Mm-hmm. Please tell John I said hello. It was great talking to him at We Have Ways Fest." So another fan.
ringer.
Right back at you, Scott. Really good to hear from you. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, so there's, I think, 2 major books about the Alamo Scouts, so I'm not sure which one, you're referring to, but regardless, it doesn't matter. Either one of them is a pretty positive portrayal of the Alamo Scouts, and I personally do think they deserve that high praise. They are really interesting, and you're right. They are a 6th Army asset. It's not an 8th Army asset, which is interesting because 8th Army was even more amphibious than 6th Army. In case anyone hasn't heard of the Alamo Scouts, these are quite highly trained, hand-picked guys that are stood up by end of 43 and early 44 by Kruger's 6th Army on New Guinea, and are going to be in play for the rest of the war. And their job is basically to be landed in clandestine fashion anywhere where the Allies are thinking about launching an amphibious invasion, to kind of do an I&R thing and figure out the Japanese strength and come back with all that info for the invasion planners. And the first place this happens is at Los Negros, where they go in and have a very crucial role because all we had was photo recon of the place. And this is a bit of a risk for MacArthur to send about a battalion-sized landing force in there from the 1st Cavalry Division. And why are we doing this? Well, they think there's a really good opportunity to get an easy grab of a key airfield that will accelerate the pace of MacArthur's operations so that he can get further across New Guinea and get onto the Philippines. So it's chancy, and the Alamo Scouts come back with information about how the Japanese defenses are stronger than photo recon had shown. So it's a tough call for MacArthur. It's really probably one of his best decisions in the war, though, to go forward with it, and the Alamo Scouts are a very important element of it. So this is a pattern set through the rest of the war, especially in the Philippines. They're going to be used a lot. And the incredible thing about these guys, they don't suffer even 1 killed in action in the war. So their role is remarkably similar to what you're going to see later in Vietnam, the long-range reconnaissance patrols, or LRPs. And that's a deadlier go in Vietnam, but it's a very similar role in terms of how they're chosen. It's generally like maybe 1 out of 4 that get picked and go through, and they operate in very small teams, usually like squad-sized teams or even smaller. They're inserted sometimes like PBY, like flying boats, that kind of thing. Sometimes by submarine. It just kind of varies. So I do think that they deserve that excellent characterization.
Okay, everything you said was wrong, John. Okay, let me get this record straight from all of my research. Mark, what is the name of the young man that sent that question in again?
That was Scott Breimer.
Okay, I think that's an anagram for John McManus. Okay, I don't want to get accusatory here,
Well, but I thought everything I said was wrong.
so I can answer that. Everything I know about the Alamo Scouts comes from John's books. So we'll just leave it at that. I'll just sum up by saying, yeah.
All right.
Well, the other thing about them too is that when they started to run out of these like recon missions, some of them functioned as bodyguards for General Kruger too later in the war. So they kind of had that role, some of them.
John, let me ask you this. So there was the Alamo Force, which was what MacArthur named Sixth Army, right? And then you have the Alamo Scouts. Why Alamo?
Because General Kruger had decided to retire in San Antonio after the war. So it was an homage to where his retirement home was going to be. His wife Grace was already looking for a house. They eventually were gonna buy a house there, and so the choice of Alamo was that part of that theme. And the whole Alamo Force thing is so MacArthur because it's built on sort of deception and high-handedness in the sense that they were standing up an army level formation. But MacArthur was concerned that the Australians would have generals of more rank than whatever he could, present. Like Eichelberger didn't have enough rank compared to some of these guys, and they would want control of that army. So he didn't want them to know they did an army level force in theater, and then that's why he brings Kruger over too. One reason, because he has that kind of seniority.
I wonder if Kruger ever thought of naming it like the Whataburger Force or the Bucky Force. If they're really going for that San Antonio, He
was thinking McDonald's too. Yeah, no, I don't know.
McDonald's isn't really unique to San Antonio the way Buc-ee's
so are those other places unique to San Antonio? I apologize.
Oh yeah, you guys have never heard of a Buc-ee's? They're like a warehouse of food and gas.
Oh yeah, we have them in Missouri. Yeah.
I think they started in San Antonio, and then Whataburger is just a big burger chain in Texas.
Isn't that amazing, Scott? All this. You didn't think you were going to get, Whataburger information and Buc-ee's.
Well, this dribble answer, Kevin making up stuff.
All right. What don't you get on World War II Live? That's all I'm saying. It's incredible.
That's great. So, John, I'm definitely going to give John an A+ on that answer. But Kevin, you were kind of like looking at his paper to finish your test. So I'm going to give you anything on that.
I was treading water like Kilroy.
But great. It's a great save and pivot to Whataburger, I have to say.
That's my job on this show.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is I got a few things. I got 3 things here.
Okay.
Because we started to get some questions or comments or reactions to the episodes we did with Henry Sledge, which was great. He's awesome. So the first one is just a comment, but I thought it was poignant. He said, "Gentlemen," and this is from David Moore.
Wait, gentlemen? He's talking about us?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. He came in.
He's trying to be nice. He's trying to be nice. Gentlemen, I have very much enjoyed this podcast with Henry Sledge. My father survived Hill 100 on Peleliu.
Wow.
He joined the Corps as a 15-year-old in March of 1941, ended up on the USS Tuscaloosa, and between Guadalcanal, Peleliu, and Okinawa, he carried a lot of problems, and I didn't have a good relationship with him. But these books have helped me resolve a lot of pain.
Hey, that's fantastic.
Thank you, David Moore.
Thank you, David.
So I thought that was great. Especially with Henry and when I talk to veteran sons, how much is their coming to understanding what their fathers went through and what that meant and the relationships they had. So that was
Henry would be thrilled to hear that, and that is really poignant. Yeah,
we'll have to get him to listen to the show.
Yeah, right. All right, moving on. The next one is from Sean Everett from Nebraska. So out your way, I guess, kind of Sean. He says, in Russell Davis's memoir, Marine at War, he describes his good fortune during the Peleliu operation at being assigned with a squad to provide lookout on a small island near the main island. Any idea of the name, location of the island? Davis credited this break with possibly allowing him to survive the battle. doing this by memory. I don't have the book at hand. Warm regards. Love what you're doing. Keep up the good work.
I'm so relieved that question when you said Nebraska, I thought, oh God, here comes a North Platte canteen.
I was hoping. All right, so hey, I'm going to jump in on this one.
So this is an island.
Do you guys know? Do you know, Kevin?
This is an island off Peleliu.
Yeah.
So Henry's father went to that was considered another island where the bunker was. Yeah, in Basibas, which I finally figured out how to pronounce.
The first Marine Regiment, and I don't think they were on that island. So yeah, the book is Marine at War, and it's a really
Marine at War, and this is a 1961 copy that I own. It was 45 cents in 1961, and this book this is why I had to have this question. This book was the first book I ever wrote a book report on in like the 5th grade. How crazy is that? And you were right, Kevin. It's Ingasibus.
Hey!
The island is Ingasibus.
Boom! And I pronounced it correctly.
Yes.
So he went over to Ingasibus, even though I thought he was with the 1st Marines, or am I wrong about that?
No, it said Ingasibus.
Well,
I'll have to reread the book. I mean, it's been...
he says Guadalcanal, Peleliu, and Okinawa, so that's all that's 1st Marine.
No, that's the previous person. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a different question, but so I got a copy of the hardcover many years ago, like a library resale or something, and when I was a child, and I got the same book, Mark, and devoured it back then. Yeah,
it's awesome. I'll have to give it another read. It's been decades.
John, what was your first World War II book that you remember reading?
Well, the first one I remember reading, actually, speaking of the 1st Marines, is The Story of World War II by Robert Leckie, who, of course, is portrayed in the miniseries The Pacific, and wrote a lot of terrific books about World War II. And so it was a book meant for, juvie readers, like probably 12 years old, 13 or something, and I was, maybe 6, and so into this that, I just devoured it, and I probably read that book 50 times as a kid.
Wow.
What about yours?
I think mine was, and I could be wrong though, I think it was American Caesar.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
How old were you when you read American Caesar?
In paperback, so it didn't seem so really intimidating. And I think the first hardback I read was Good War by Studs Terkel.
Oh, that's a great book.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, that came out in 1984, I think.
Yeah, I was in high school. I was at Beach Week, something we have on the East Coast with all the Catholic schools.
That's really good.
All right, I think we aced that one.
As a young kid. You weren't reading as a young kid.
No. Yeah, I really wasn't.
Come on. You're not as big a nerd as we are there.
Yeah,
Kevin.
I was dyslexic. I was still struggling with Dr. Seuss,
Okay.
Green ham and eggs, what?
Well, there's a World War II angle with Dr. Seuss, too, so maybe you were in your own way reading.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's try to get in our last question so we can get on to Whatcha Here.
Okay.
All right.
So I think we've touched on this before, but this is from Stephen Cohane.
Another anagram for John McManus. Yeah, go on.
From Easton, Mass., so up near where I'm from. He says, I'm not a fan of General MacArthur at all, but can you explain why he is still vilified for the invasion of Peleliu when in fact it was Admiral Nimitz who made the final call? And he says, my great-uncle Captain William Murphy, Company K, 322nd Infantry Regiment, 81st Infantry Division, was KIA on Bloody Nose Ridge, Silver Star, and buried at Arlington in 1948.
Hey! Yeah. Thank you. John, I want you to take the lead on that one. I can add some stuff, but obviously this is more your alley.
I am glad to take the lead on this one. What I would say in the beginning is there's enough to blame MacArthur for the things he actually did without blaming him for something he didn't. And you're right. He has been hung with this sort of Peleliu hair shirt quite unfairly. I mean, so the circumstance of what happened was he was aboard ship when the ultimate decision is made. So he's in Communicado. He was going into another invasion that isn't as well known at a place called Morotai. And was out of communication, and it was Nimitz who had to make the call. And, it was a kind of a tense relationship between the two of them. And the idea of invading Peleliu was really to kind of support MacArthur's advance on up to the Philippines, the coming invasion of Leyte. and so Nimitz probably felt that he just could not pull the plug on that because he thought MacArthur may not like that. But it's not MacArthur who makes the call. It's not his responsibility. I've always thought it was kind of interesting to imagine, had he known this, had he been in communication, what would have been his take? Because, of course, he was very big on the idea of, bypassing islands that you don't need, that are too heavily fortified. And he was constantly selling this idea that he didn't take the terrible casualties that Nimitz and the Marines did, and all this kind of really kind of rot gut as things will turn out. But yeah, I think MacArthur is blamed for that because of this misunderstanding of how it actually worked with the decision. Nimitz being a less controversial figure, MacArthur being this kind of lightning rod, and so for those who don't like MacArthur, they're inclined to just kind of pile on and say, oh yeah, and so he's responsible for Peleliu too, on top of everything else, and I think that's a little bit unfair.
I would add that MacArthur is almost a victim of his own ego. Because, in the Pacific Theater, he controls all the press coming out of theater. He's making himself the big decision maker. All these, everything stops with MacArthur. And so when a mistake happens, who do we know in that theater? Oh, only MacArthur. So I think that MacArthur brings it on himself peripherally by his attitude with his own leadership and his own ego, where, like John, you said, you use the term lightning rod. I would say, it just the way he takes up all the air, in the room, of all the space, that when something goes wrong, when things are going right and he's taking all the credit, when something goes wrong, it's like, you're the one saying you're calling all the shots, so we're gonna dump that on you. So pretty much in line with what you said, but I really think he kind of does it to himself with the bloated ego and controlling all the communications about what's happening in the Pacific. And let's face it, Nimitz, to my knowledge and everything, I just can't picture him giving lots of press conferences and things like that. The way he didn't handle the media and try to control it the way MacArthur did, and I think the media was, in the Navy was more focused on the frontline stuff, where MacArthur definitely wanted the attention and Nimitz did not.
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys, that wasn't bad going on your permanent record, except for Kevin, where you were cheating and copying off John's paper there. But, it's all right.
Well, after that accusation, John, whatcha?
All right. Yeah, so I spent the last weekend in Richmond, Virginia, at the America's History LLC World War II conference, run by Bruce and Lynn Venter. Just a great conference, so much fun. We convene in this beautiful conference center in the Richmond, Virginia area, and it's just hardcore World War II stuff with great questions, smart people. I gave a talk about Alamo and the Ardennes, a book I did about the race for Bastogne. And the other cool thing is we spent the day basically on site, recording for another podcast I do called Someone Talked. My co-hosts John Long and April Cheek Messier came up, and so we just grabbed people. They're wonderful people, them. So we just grabbed people, everybody from Craig Simons to Lynn Venter, to David Barrett. John Parshall. We had a ton of folks on. It was a great time.
Mark, we're gonna have to crash that next year when John's there. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
We'll have to get John Long and April out of the way. Lock them in a closet and then go around and do what they did last year.
It's all right. We'll have to heckle John from the audience.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
Really
I totally see that happening. You guys would be good at that, I'm sure.
You know nothing about the Alamo Scouts.
Clearly. All right, Kevin, what's you?
Well, I am proud to say I took a hot date to a movie this weekend.
Yes.
His name was Mark Fastoso. So Mark and I decided...
John was a perfect gentleman, I have to say.
Kevin.
I'm glad you
Kevin.
loved it.
Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't take Kevin.
I don't know. Sorry.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
So we went to see Nuremberg, the new movie with Russell Crowe and Rami Malek. And I'll tell you, if you thought Judgment in Nuremberg was an amazing film. Well, I can tell you that this is another film. It was pretty dang long. It was rather ham-fisted. Don't you understand how important this is? You know, right. Russell Crowe, I thought, did a very credible job as Herman Goering. Remy Malek, I think he's a brilliant actor, but this just did not seem like the right fit for him. It was funny because it built to this great, confrontation between the American lawyer Anderson and Herman Goering.
Jackson.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark even said to me beforehand, what was that, like the dialogue was 13 pages, and they said
17 pages of filming to do the scene between Jackson and Goering, right? And that's supposed to be the big moment, the big courtroom moment. Like if you've seen a Few Good Men, right? That's the you can't handle the truth, right? So it's 17 pages, which is a huge amount to film. And Russell Crowe said, if we don't do it all in one day, it's going to be really hard to pick up on multiple days because you're right in the middle of a conversation. And so he pushed the director to say, well, we're going to do it all in one day. And the director's like, is that humanly possible? And Russell Crowe says, hey, I was just on a Superman movie. I'm from Krypton. I can do anything, right? So in my mind, I'm like, wow, this is going to be amazing.
And you told me.
This.
Yeah.
And I told you. And when the movie was over, I was like, I said something about that scene. And you said to me, Kevin, oh, I don't know. I kept falling asleep during that scene.
I did.
And then I said, yeah, me too.
That's when you know a movie's really good, really compelling.
Yeah.
When you can catch up on your sleep.
In the movie, Jackson gets warned by Remy Malek's character, like, hey, listen, I know Herman Goering psychologically. He's going to run circles around you for what you plan to say. And then there's a scene where he runs back and he has, hey, here's Herman Goering's opening statement. I forget, but that kind of does play out. He can't pin Herman Goering down, but then the British lawyer stands up and, nails him with something. And in reality, it was a Soviet lawyer who, he kind of did run circles around Jackson first time they confronted each other. But it was a Soviet lawyer that gets up and says, hey, here's a document you signed saying, it's okay to shoot Soviet fighter pilots if they're parachuting down. That's an order you gave. And so instead of trying to go for this crimes against humanity, you guys are evil, he hit him with no, this is a pragmatic thing you did. And that's when Goering's defense starts to fall apart. And of course, they didn't even have a Soviet lawyer in the movie anywhere. So I was a little disappointed. I thought some of the visuals were good. It starts off really well. They got guys in the 36th Infantry Division capturing him at a roadblock. And obviously 36th Division at the time was under 7th Army, and we know that it's 7th Army. There was a movie with Alec Baldwin about Nuremberg. I think it was just called Nuremberg. And in it, they capture Herman Goering, and the Air Force generals or the Army Air Forces generals have champagne with them, and they're laughing, and there's photographs, and it's this huge black eye to the military. I've seen those photographs of Herman Goering when he was captured, and he's being interviewed by guys with 7th Army patches. I've never seen any of this partying, drinking thing before. I don't know if that was a Hollywood device or if that's something where they got rid of all of the evidence. But I've read a lot on Goering. I've read transcripts of his interviews, and he can weasel his way out of anything. We always knew we were going to lose the war. He had an excuse no matter how hard they tried to pin him on stuff. And I was actually on a documentary. I don't know if it ever ran. They never told me. But it was about Nuremberg and what this company, this film production team had done. They found the actual audio tapes in an attic in Bern, Switzerland. And so they said, we're making a documentary about this. Can you be a talking head? And so I did a bunch of reading. And in one of the interviews with Herman Goering, he says, anytime someone said, these guys are doing criminal stuff, we're like, they hate Germany and he needs to be imprisoned. And a lot of these were professors and stuff trying to point out that these guys had a ruinous, philosophy behind them. And it was like, oh, it's easy. We just say that they're traitors to the country and we would jail them. And, we had there was this brand new technology called radio that wasn't regulated. So we could put out all kinds of lies and and I'm like, oh my God. I went in there with the torture of too much knowledge, I guess, to see that movie. And John, both of you guys know this, that a lot of the movies that come out about World War II sometimes today, the big plot twist or the big reveal is something we've all known about. I remember there was one about British Enigma stuff, and the big finding was the Kachin Forest in Poland, that it was the Soviets that killed all the Poles. And so while it's this shocker reveal at the end of the movie, I'm like, well, duh. Didn't really have the same impact.
So I would just say, if you compare this to Judgment at Nuremberg, the classic film, right? Judgment at Nuremberg is a much better film.
Yeah.
Really great to watch. It's an incredible
It's a classic.
film. It's a classic, but one thing is that film came out, I think it was in the early 60s, because William Shatner was like a young guy pre-Captain Kirk,
Well,
right?
but he was a captain. He was an army captain.
But he was a captain, yes, you're right. And now this film is made in 2025. And one thing you said to me, Kevin, is, oh my God, they're hitting us over the head with information.
Yes.
Which I agree, right? An audience in 1961 probably knew a lot more, right, than the audience does now. And I think the filmmaker today was saying an audience in 2025 is not going to know a lot of the backstory. And unfortunately, I think they went overboard with that, and it killed the drama.
Yeah, it's like if you were watching Schindler's List and they kept saying, "Hey, this Holocaust thing is terrible." Yes, we know. You don't have to keep telling us. Right. So the film did suffer from quite a bit of that.
All right, great.
Well, we've batted a lot of things around tonight, including Whataburger, of course, in addition to the Alamo Scouts and Kevin's amazing book, Patton's Photographs, and of course. So don't forget, again, in the weeks to come, we've got a Sicily series coming out. Great stuff. So look for that on our YouTube channel, World War II Live, of course, and then of course on the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple. Everywhere you can go. Make sure to subscribe, to like, to share, to give us comments, give us feedback. Send us questions at worldwar2live@gmail.com, worldwar2live@gmail.com with the Arabic numeral 2. Send those questions for Stump the Chumps and prove, as always, what chumps we truly are. So this has been a good one tonight, as always. Been a lot of fun, gentlemen. And I think
pleasure, my friend.
Yeah. Good stuff. Thanks, one and all. Thanks for joining us, and Roger out.